as Jennifer said, I work for Butte County Administration. I'm a deputy CAO. She listed off some of my responsibilities, and as you all know, we wear many, many hats in local government, so it just really depends on the day or the email what we're doing. Um, when Jennifer asked me to do this presentation, I said, "Jennifer, I'm a wreck of a human being." I was like, "I'm a complete disaster." She's like, "No, actually, that's great. Like, that's what we want to talk about. Like, we want to talk about the realities of long-term recovery." So she and I had many hard conversations, kind of preparing me for this presentation, but I am going to be vulnerable. With that, I do want to share a little bit of details about the content. I think it's only fair for all of us in this room who have experienced disaster to be very honest about what content we're going to be sharing. I have a real sort of personal policy on not sharing disaster imagery when I don't have to. There's a little bit of that in my slideshow. The word suicide may slip out of my mouth. And I will be talking about, pain and suffering for people and animals. So I think we all know that that's the reality of disaster, but I just wanted to mention that in case anyone wants to sort of check themselves on those topics. So I really want to again thank Jennifer for being here and for creating this space for us to have hard conversations. I'm really honored today to give a presentation that I wish would have been given to me when I entered this field many years ago. Um, I really did seek out support. I worked with Cal OES and FEMA on, can you connect me with other people in the world who have the title disaster recovery director when I worked for the town of Paradise? And they were like, sure, let us try. So they gave me a couple of names for folks working in flood recovery in Florida. And after one or two emails, we just didn't connect. So wildfire is a very, very different type of disaster. I know that now because in Butte County, we're dealing with floods and, debris flow and all sorts of experiences that we have post wildfire. But wildfire really is something special. So I wanted to just really acknowledge Jennifer for creating this space, this event, and this opportunity for me to share with you. I did catch some of the presentations yesterday, and I heard a lot about data and calls to action, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. I really have none of that in this presentation. Really, my call to action is just to, tune in, really listen to yourself and listen to others so that we can be together in this hardship. So, my first fire experience actually was the Oakland Hills fire in 1991. I was 15 years old and I lived just on the other side of the Oakland Hills and I saw the fire glow and I didn't really know what any of it meant. I was very aware that the Claremont Hotel was in danger and that's all the news could talk about. Thankfully, it survived, but a lot of homes and multifamily housing structures in the Oakland Hills did not. So, for the next 10 years, I watched the rebuild on the hillside as a lot of those great homes did come back to enjoy that beautiful view shed, but it really didn't change me personally in the way that the fires in Butte County have. Just 3 months after I moved to Paradise, California with my cutie patootie when she was 3 years old, the Humboldt fire started in Chico. And I found myself grabbing, Adela from preschool and driving downhill with no other cars because law enforcement was pointing at people in another direction, but I was like, "I gotta get out. I'm going down." And so, I drove Adela with flames on both sides of the car, past firefighters, and, she, who never, ever, ever slept in the car, put herself promptly to sleep, and I cried all the way down. And that really sort of changed my life, I think, in terms of how fragile everything feels and how sort of scary parenting is when you have to actually carry your children through tragedy. But it really was the campfire in 2018 that completely ripped me apart. I mean, I think it ripped a lot of people apart. Just from the international charitable contributions our local foundation received, it really touched a lot of people worldwide. It, tragically took 85 lives, almost 19,000 structures, 94% of the town of Paradise housing stock. It still gives me chills. I still have a very hard time talking about it. But it really was the campfire that just sort of permanently changed me. I got a call after the campfire from the town manager for the town of Paradise, and she said, "I really respect and admire your work, and I know you love Paradise. I'd like you to come work for me as disaster recovery director." And I said, "Gosh, that sounds like a really hard, depressing job." And she said, "No, it's one of the most meaningful, life-affirming jobs you'll ever have." And she was 100% right about 10% of the job. Okay. So if I were sitting with myself back then, I would have said, "Put on your boxing gloves, punch yourself a couple of times in the face so that you're already bleeding and you're not shocked by the punches that are coming, and then enter the ring." Um, Anywho, I said yes, compelled really by my love for the town of Paradise, my love for the town government, and just the community at large. And my heart has really never left it. So, unfortunately, when I was disaster recovery director at the town, we were hit by the North Complex. This was entirely in the unincorporated area of Butte County. It did take an additional 15 lives and destroyed almost 2,500 structures. We did see the loss of teeny tiny rural communities that are sort of slowly eking their way back. I think I heard someone mention yesterday that recovery really is, takes a long time. It takes longer than anyone would think. Only 4% of the houses lost in the North Complex, which just hit its 5-year anniversary this week, have been rebuilt. For Campfire, only 14% in the unincorporated area. This does not include the town of Paradise. So we're really seeing a very, very slow recovery of housing in these burn scars. Um, I think what was particularly challenging about the North Complex is that, PG&E sort of understandably called a PSPS event that morning, which means when the town of Paradise was voluntarily evacuating, because that's what we do when we see fire in the distance, it was without power. And so we had to pull out generators and stand out in the intersections and direct folks down. And I had ashes in my eyelashes, and I was like, the world is burning down and so am I, but we keep going. Dixie Fire, I actually moved to Butte County where I still do disaster recovery, and the Dixie Fire ignited just one day after I joined the county staff. So I was like, well, this is consistent. And so I found myself, I'm in the emergency operations center. My role is liaison, which means I coordinate with all of the third party agencies and the government and first responders for response, repopulation, recovery, long term recovery, all the things. And so I found myself in the EOC for Dixie Fire, which tragically took one firefighter. Life and burned almost 1 million acres. So, this is the largest single ignition wildfire in California history. It was, didn't have the majority of its impacts, of course, in Butte County. It had impacted the counties surrounding Butte County. But it was just another reminder of how vulnerable and how frequent, these fires really are for us. And so I think you just sort of, as a human being, settle into a gear where this becomes your reality and you start to lose your friends and become depressed. But anyway, we'll get there. Okay, so then Park Fire. This was last summer. Park Fire, fourth largest fire in state history, second largest single ignition, started in the city of Chico. We did lose, over 700 structures between Butte County and Tehama County. And we are still administering debris and tree removal with Cal OES, Cal Recycle, and their contractors. So uh, on one hand, I'm working to close out campfire debris recovery insurance collections, which is still going after 6 years, and we're moving properties through abatement for debris removal for park fire. So, and the rest of the fires sort of anywhere in between, and that's literally, just every single day we're taking survivors through these very hard processes. So, very grateful to have the state support, but this was not a federally declared disaster, so the resources for survivors for this disaster are going to be far less than from some of our others. So, Butte County, we have our share of issues. So, this was the spillway incident with the Oroville Dam in 2017. This was definitely a wake up call for our community. Preceded, of course, the campfire caused an evacuation of 200,000 people downstream from the Oroville Dam. Jail, juvenile hall. We learned a lot as a government about how to move very quickly when you have to. And so What I have here on the slide is just the 10 federally declared disasters that Butte County has experienced since 2017. As I said, we have had other disasters like Park that weren't federally declared, so those are not on this list. So Jennifer mentioned what we do. What I do at Butte County is I oversee emergency management, long-term recovery, and hazard mitigation, everything in between. And what that looks like is a lot of field work, a lot of programs going out into the community, but it also looks like a lot of record keeping in spreadsheets, a lot of regulatory compliance, a lot of meetings with HCD, HUD, FEMA, Cal OES. I was just reflecting this morning that our last grant for Campfire will close out in 2081. So we are writing policy now with our auditor to close out the development agreements for our multifamily housing projects for auditors who won't even be born for another 20 years. Like, that's just really weird. But that's sort of what you do. When we say long term recovery, we really, really mean it. And so we have the experience of looking far, far ahead into the future at how we're going to eventually wind down Campfire and in the meantime continue to experience disaster. So we really learn from each one. So here's where I'm just going to be honest with you. Absolutely is this life affirming, fulfilling, gratifying work 100%. But is it re-traumatizing, enraging, socially isolating, disassociating, impossible to master? 100%. It is all of those things. And I wish someone would have sat down with me when I took my first step into the Town of Paradise office and said to me, "This is going to hurt." I really wish someone had said that to me. What I'm going to talk about now is not necessarily the hurt, what you can do with it to inform your leadership and your own personal recovery. But I just want to take a moment to say, this is a club over the head every single day, every single email. It is like, are you kidding me? Okay, this is what we're doing. Let's keep going. It's onboarding staff, it's preparing them for the hardship, it's getting them through just their own sort of like, but what does Cal OES mean when they say? And I'm like, okay, my interpretation of policy, how we're going to move forward. There's a ton of navigation with our chief administrative officer and our board of directors, our board of supervisors, just constant navigation, being nimble constantly, hitting our heads against the wall, but not forever because then we couldn't function. But it really is all of these things. And someday, 5, 10 years, I'll look in my little rearview mirror when all of this is behind me, and I think I'll be really proud of what we're doing right now. But I'll tell you, that's not how I spend my days. I don't spend my days going, woohoo, we just you know what I mean? We just I don't even know what a win would be, but I don't spend my days celebrating. I don't spend my days in pride. I actually spend my days quite alone because, in disaster recovery, embedded within local governments, there are lots of folks doing different jobs to support recovery, but every one of those jobs is different. And so building community, getting together, being honest and talking about the hardship, I think is so critical. Okay, so I have found ways to reduce trauma both for myself and others within leadership, and this is super important for me. Uh, I think about kind of the trauma informed approach. You have to assume the presence of trauma and do everything in your power to reduce it. So we already sort of established recovery is re traumatizing because you're reliving the disaster over and over and over again. We have campfire survivors who come into my office once a month with their $10 checks to make a payment for debris removal. And literally every single visit to our office, they sit down with our very, very special, very, very precious, customer service just angel on this project, and they retell her their disaster story every single time. And so then she comes to me and we flush it out and, she moves on with her work. But, you know, when you look out into a sea of a community that has been destroyed and you're going to be engaging with survivors, you're going to encounter trauma. You may feel trauma yourself. You may be a survivor yourself. So having that trauma informed approach is super important. I also help consultants, journalists, and academics understand how to reduce trauma in disaster recovery. You will be surprised, or probably not, how many consultants say things that I go, bing. That's my little trauma monster coming out. They really sort of set me off, and I have to be very gentle and very professional and work with consultants to understand how to sensitize their language, how to prepare for public meetings in disaster impacted communities, how to be very sensitive with myself and staff. And so I have this whole little how to booklet, my little consultant 101 sheet that I send out to all consultants. And I'm like, I need you to know this and I need you to do your homework before you even engage with me and my staff. So I protect people from disaster imagery. If I don't have to show it, I don't show it. The number of times I have to see flames in front of my eyeballs, whether they're actually happening outside of the office or they're on my screen for some, I'm on the California Wildfire Safety Task Force webinars and I'm doing all these sorts of things. And it's like we just sort of are constantly bombarded by flames. And I think really to protect ourselves and our sort of sensitive gray matter, we have to be really aware at what those images do to us. I was at the gym in January, walking on my little treadmill, doing my thing in the morning, and literally, all 25 screens in the gym were just the tragic LA fires. And I literally called HR that afternoon and I was like, I need some help. Like, I can't do this, and so they got me some help, which was great. See, it wasn't even our fire, it was fires in another area that I just was like, "I can't take it in anymore, I can't," and so, it was nice to be able to say that and to have someone say, "We'll help you." Okay. So, pick your Muppet, I don't know which Muppet you are, but this is me. Um, I call him my little trauma monster, and he, really does come out when I am triggered by something someone has said and I really pay attention to what I call recovery rage. I think it can be very informative. I think we can learn a lot from the moments we get really, really mad, which I do at least, a couple of times a day. But I pay attention to that rage. I remember saying to the town manager when they hired me in Paradise, I was like, "Am I supposed to be in a rage all the time? Like, I'm not a mad person. Like, I'm actually not that person, but now I am." And the response was, "If you're not mad, you're not paying attention." So I was like, "Okay, again, that's sort of the gear that you have to shift into." But pay attention to what makes you mad because amplify that for survivors, and really pay attention to your own feelings as you're navigating programs, processes, policies, public meetings, those kinds of things, because you're really wanting to tune into that and dial down wherever you can for survivors. Um, I say not for us, but because of us. The amount of advocacy we do in Butte County, I really feel like we punch well above our weight. I know I'm super small, but I can knock a punch with my little letters that I write. Um, that's right. You're getting a letter. Um, I do a lot of advocacy, and we do a lot of advocacy. We have, lobbyists, of course, federal and state level, and a lot is at stake for us. A lot is at stake for Butte County. And oftentimes we see change for other recovery processes because of what we've shared, not for us. So the change doesn't come for us, but but it comes because of us, right? And so that is a little moment of like, I don't know how to describe it inside of myself, but like when I hear that another community has a teensy tiny bit less hardship than we had because we taught Cal OES, right, how to do debris removal and tree removal in a consolidated whatever, um, I feel like the pain is a little bit worth it. So I will say we will keep advocating and I'll keep sending those letters. Your story matters. I think, as I said, survivors do repeat their trauma. We receive it, but we also have to tell our stories. And I have found that there's nothing like walking into my coworker's office, having a massive, animal Muppet explosion. And then literally 30 seconds later, I feel totally fine. And I'm able to go back to my desk and be like, "Dear Cal Recycle." Um, so, you know, tell your story. We have to normalize social isolation. It's probably too small, that graphic to see there, but that is a heat map of postal addresses a year after the campfire. So you can see that the majority of folks sort of remained on the West Coast, but a lot of them did scatter across the United States. I sort of call it the boomerang effect. Survivors move, they come back, they move again, they stay, they wish they left, they rebuild, then they sell their house. I mean, it's just like communities are churning, relationships are absolutely exploding. I mentioned sort of this new rage threshold that I found, in disaster recovery while my parents were going through itemizing their insurance. claim for their campfire losses. And it was like, I really couldn't do both, and you have to sort of identify those boundaries. And sometimes you can't help your parents because you're helping your community. It's really, really challenging. Um, I also think trauma grows. I don't think the disaster ends and you're like, whew, that was that okay, now I have to learn how to, like, live with this trauma. It actually grows and grows, through recovery. I think debris and tree removal is just additional destruction. It's additional loss for survivors. It's hard to walk them through letting go of grandma's apple tree because, it's dead and dying and the threatening right of way, and you know what I mean? Like, you have to walk people through additional loss. So my experience as a disaster worker and working with survivors is that trauma actually grows. Loneliness is unavoidable but survivable. I'm not entirely believing this, but this is what I repeat to myself. This is a very isolating job, very isolating work. You're reporting to the EOC again, and you can see the flames in the hillside, and you're like, I actually just want to lay down on my face for 3 months, but I can't do that, so I have to like go do this. And I really appreciate the meaning of serving in the EOC. I think it is incredibly gratifying, but it is very, very challenging because you are sitting in a room with folks getting word from CAL FIRE, and this story is not going to be good. And so you have to move your way through that experience in the EOC and get everybody ready for what recovery is going to look like. Um, so it is very lonely, but I'm still alive, so it's survivable so far. I think disassociation is one of those things. That's how my brain reacts to trauma. I don't know that everybody's brain reacts like that, but I'll give you a quick example. I was at an emergency operations center training that Cal Water hosted, and we did the whole sort of theory in the morning, and then we were going to do the exercise in the afternoon. And our instructor said, "Okay, when you come back from lunch, I'm going to show you a play-by-play of the LA fires." And I was like, "Oh." I don't know if I really don't know if I can sit through that, but I said, well, maybe it's meaningful for the exercise. I better not miss an opportunity to get information and be ready for my role. And they showed the fires. My brain went entirely offline. I watched the instructor's mouth move for the next 20 minutes, and I was like, he's apparently talking. People are listening to him. I'm just completely offline. And so it took me really the rest of the day to build up the courage to say to him, we go through these disasters. We see this with our own eyes. We are, at some phase of recovery with one of our disasters. I don't think this group in Butte County needs to see this imagery. And he said, "Oh, that never occurred to me before." And he goes, I'm actually a little bit ashamed that we've had fire survivors up and down the state sit in these trainings, and we've never thought to give them a heads up to protect themselves if they didn't want to see the suffering. So, that took a lot out of me. I was, like, exhausted after I made just that one comment, but I was like, "They have to know. Like, just tell me you're going to subject me to that." And he did give us a heads up, but not the details. And, so I just try to do for others what I hope will be done for me, and I try to spread the word on that. When you can't tune in, when got nothing going on inside of your brain or your body because you're absent, you really what helps me is to really tune out. I sat in a park fire recovery meeting. I think it was earlier this year, and the meeting was super difficult, right? Because these are survivors. They're adrenalized. They're not really able at this stage of recovery to take in a lot of information. And so you're just sort of gently plodding along and sort of repeating yourself. And all you really want them to leave with is contact information. And I remember just the room was like just high emotion. People are devastated. A lot of these folks are senior citizens. And I just went outside and I thought, I just need to go like sit in the night by myself. And this fire survivor walked out, and he had this little walker, and he like clicked his little walker across the parking lot. And I just listened to the sound of the walker, and I listened to him get in his car and drive away. And it was like, I literally have to do moments like that just to be like, I'm here. We're going to do this. We are doing this, and it's very hard, but also the world goes on, and I'm part of it. And so I just do those little things to ground myself. And then really allow yourself to change. I think I was like a pretty decent person before wildfire recovery, and now I question my whole existence. But I think that I have given up. I'm sort of like, I am changing because of this. I know things I'll never unknow. I've seen things I'll never unsee. I've heard things in EOC and had to have conversations with people I will never be able to kind of get out of my mind. But like, that's what I've done for my community. That's my choice. I chose that. And so I do let it sort of change who I am. And I also see I have 5 minutes left. So I think, recovery is impossible to master. Every fire is different. We say in Butte County, if you know one fire, you know one fire. If you've done one fire, you've done one fire. Like, here comes the next one, and you're like, "What in the world?" Like, "What?" This is totally different. So, just the different disaster declarations, if there's settlements or no settlements, every fire is totally different. I say disaster recovery is by design inequitable. And I believe that because anytime you put a threshold or an eligibility or a qualification in on money, you're creating haves and have nots. So I think disaster recovery is by design inequitable. And so I think that you have to just constantly work with different sets of resources for different fires. I sort of call it the bifocal effect. I can look into the distance and I can see campfire recovery, and I need a totally different lens to look over here and see North Complex recovery. And then park fires, those that's my close-up lens. So, one of the things that I like to think about is I do avoid success stories and expertise. I I don't think that's applicable to everybody, certainly not agencies who are very proud of the work they're doing in recovery. I think government takes its storytelling a little bit different. That's really the work of elected officials and should be. But what I mean by that is just be very humble because disaster will just literally continue to humble you. I would never ever say, like, when Jennifer asked me to speak at this, it was like, yeah, but I'm not an expert. I just keep doing this, right? I don't know all the things. Literally every single day, I'm like, what? I have to solve a new problem I didn't even see coming. And I think success stories can feel different for different people. I watched a hurricane video that some consultants thought would allow them to relate to us. I'm like, that's not relating to us. But in the tornadoes, one of the speakers said, this disaster is the best thing that ever happened to us. And you cannot say that about a disaster that has taken 85 lives. I will never stand up before an audience and say, best thing that I can't even complete the sentence, right? People are losing their lives, their livelihoods, their property. Communities are changing permanently, maybe not ever returning. And so I would never say that. I would also be very careful not to, we'd have to do a lot of tours of recovery in Butte County, lawmakers, elected officials, associations. We proudly do those tours, but we're very, very careful to ground those tours and not exploit the suffering of our community, because we don't want to perpetuate disaster tourism. We don't want to be part of that. And so I basically just I sort of sometimes cry with them, and I'm like, this is real, and it feels bad. So I try to keep it very, very real. Healing and hardship, recovery doesn't happen overnight. This is our spillway being repaired. You can see the teeny tiny little porta potties down there. It sort of gives you the scale of the job. This took years, right? And that is just one of our many, many federally funded projects in Butte County to sort of repair a lot of our losses and damages. I think that I sort of feel like in spirit, I'm kind of a sprinter because I'm like, I really want to go fast and I want to get it done. But this is like an ultra marathon that never ends. So I'm like, temper yourself, like slow it down. Like you got to keep going. So I would say, just connect with people who can appreciate the incremental progress you're able to make, and even those 2 steps back that you have to make every once in a while, so that you can feel like you're still doing it. Oh, this is funny to show you a picture of a sea anemone, but this is my word for 2025. This is just sort of where I am as a person right now. I'm pretty closed off. I feel like I'm at a moment in time where I'm about to sort of like reopen, I hope, and be a little more vibrant of a person, instead of just so focused on some of the hardships at work. But I also, I share this with you because I actually think it's okay to close off and be covered in rocks for a while and just be like, I'm not available for social things and small talk, and I'm not available for that. Like, I actually need to go for long walks by myself, and I need to, write or something like that. Whatever works for you, I think that's super important. So I'll just end with this. I think long-term recovery, we're all so different. We all bring to recovery different life experiences, different values, different beliefs in the world, different, expectations of government, all kinds of things. Like we are all different people. We are all approaching recovery very, very differently. And I think that how we hold ourselves in recovery and how we move ourselves through it, is very, very personal. So for me, one of the things that I had to really acknowledge for myself is the impact of wildfires on livestock and wildlife just gets me every time. I am a destroyed person. Like my heart is broken when I think about all the livestock that we've lost in Butte County from some of our major foothill fires. I was sitting on a park fire watershed emergency response team meeting a couple of months ago, and they were they were talking. I shouldn't laugh. They were talking about the impacts of the watershed. Obviously, when you have a high severity fire, you don't have any soil stability. The trees are gone. The watershed is moving and it's clouding the creeks, and you've got a lot of runoff and debris flow. And so they were talking about tragically sort of the impact to the salmon, who rely on these rivers to spawn. And their slide was a picture of a baby salmon with googly eyes. And I'm telling you, I cried for the rest of the day because I was like, look at this little vulnerable guy who is impacted by fire. And, I obviously need to get my shit together. But I share that because this can like hit you out of the blue on the side of your head. You're like, okay, I'm here for this watershed emergency response team meeting. I'm going to hear all the data and science. We're going to figure out how to set ourselves up to respond for flood in the city of Chico. Okay, here we are. We're going to do it. And then they show a picture of a baby salmon. And I'm like, I can't function for a minute. So, but here's the thing. I know that about myself. I accept that about myself. I move on with it. I happened to go up into the park fire with our fire chief just a week after the fire, and we were standing there and it's desolate and, just doing our thing. And I heard this little like peep peep sound, and I looked and there was this little covey of quails just like hopping along in the dirt. And I was like, oh my God. That was like the gift for me, is just to see that life still persists. And the when I see that the animals are okay and they're going to be okay, something about that sort of stitches me together a little bit. That is my personal hardship. I think everybody has a different personal heartbreak with all of our disasters. I think when you know yours, you can just sort of let it flow you and flow through, and you're like, okay, there's my personal sadness. Um, I think becoming a mentor and a coach in this industry is super important. I have not met anyone who is maybe as candid as I am, until I met Jennifer and kind of the after the fire team. I was like, yes. She handed me these little wooden like fucks, and I was like, you're my people. uh, I have fucks to give because Jennifer just handed them to me. Okay, anyway. Um, like, say the things. I when I onboard staff, if I'm like, "You guys, this is gonna be great," you're gonna be so proud of yourself and you're gonna leave, like, feeling on top of the world every day. Like, no, they're actually not, right? I'm not either, but we're gonna get ourselves through it together. So, be honest when you're onboarding staff. This is a long, long haul. You're going to have temporary staff, as we do, come in and out for grant-funded programs, and I try to make it meaningful for them, but I also honor where they're coming from and where they're going, and just this moment in time we have together to do disaster recovery. Um, I also think that, and this is sort of where I hope I'm coming to with my sea anemone phase, is I'm starting to recognize that all of the work that I'm putting into rebuilding our community really does need to go into rebuilding myself. And that's something that, like, 5, 6, 7 years in, you'd think you'd already know, like, oh, I need to self-care, whatever. No, I don't come by that naturally anyway. But I am starting to see that all of the effort and the time and the energy and the love that I pour into my job and into my community, that I deserve it as well. And so I'm starting to try to figure out how to flip that back inside and shine some of that light inside of myself, so that literally for the next time, because there will be a next time, I'm that much stronger and that much more prepared to help the community. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you.